Hi everybody at the Peaceful Arts Mystical Gathering. Today is March 14th, and as part of our April Mystical Gatherings, I am going to be doing Dr. Emotos' rice experiment with a little bit of a twist. I've got all of my rice jars boiled, cleaned, labeled, like all of that. We'll talk about it in just a moment. We have just, I'm assuming, watched some videos on Dr. Emoto and his work with water, freezing water droplets and taking photographs of water before and after these crystals form. The idea is that water holds the intention of whatever you're putting into it, and the pictures reflect that. Now I've got a little thing here on my computer screen. Dr. Emoto is right there. Some of the crystals that he has taken photographs of. There we go. So I'll pretend. Here we are. And there's someone who's displayed their rice experiment. Years ago, I did experiments with plants back in the 70s, where when it first came out, people believed that if you sang or talked to your plants, they would grow better. I did that experiment in a biology class where I sang to a set of sweet pea plants, and on the other ones, I had a control where I did nothing to them. And the results of that were that the ones that were sung to grew 7 or 8 inches taller than the actual other plant. They had bigger leaves, thicker stems, and on the whole were just completely better. So this experiment with the rice has intrigued me for a long time. So I'm going to do the experiment as Dr. Emoto and many, many people on the internet have done, where they have a control jar of rice. They have a love jar where you tell it that you love it, that it's the most wonderful, nutritious rice on the planet, like you do all these loving words to it. Then you have the third jar where you tell it you hate it, it's awful, it's rotten, and all of the negativity that you can think of. And most people yell at the hate jar. Most people sort of coon and are really nice to the other jar. My twist is that I'm going to have 3 other jars labeled in exactly the same way, but I'm only going to think at it. I am not going to use words and yelling and that. I will just be thinking, and I'll put a hand on either side of the jar and just think at the jar, and we'll see what happens. So here we are at day 4. It seems like nothing much is happening in any of the jars yet. Here are some quick photos of what's happening so far. Hi everybody, it's day 6 and I have found something is up with the rice. So I'll just show you a few pictures and let you see what you think. There's the love rice. This, you can see there's a little bit of something happening. Here's the control. Definitely have something starting to happen. There's sort of a large spot up there, and doesn't look too bad. The hate rice, you can see, is really starting to go. Yeah, there we go. And on the thought rice, there's our thought rice. There's our love rice, doesn't look too bad. Our control jar, and a little spot there, and one up here. Our thought hate jar has quite a lot of mold and stuff happening. So we are beginning to see some results on day 6. We'll see what happens in a little while. So here we are back still in day 6, and I thought I would compare the love word to the love thought jar and so on, and we will see. So we have noticed some results. There's a tiny bit of mold in the word jar where I physically tell the jar that I love it, that it's the best rice. There's a tiny little bit there. And oh, up on top, okay, maybe if I back up, there you can see just in here there's one spot at the top, and that's with the words. With the thought jar, it's looking fairly good. I do envision it being white and lovely and all of that, and of course sending as much love energy as possible. I'm not really seeing a big... Oh, there's a little spot in behind the label that's on the jar. On the jar has like a chalk label. I can't really see it from that side. So there is a spot in behind there. So one spot on this jar. And let's go and compare the hate jars. There we go. Here's the hate jars. The word jar. You can see without me even pointing out quite a difference. So the word jar, where I speak to it, has... There's a spot there. Oh, no, that's just the jar bottom. There we go. A little bit there. And of course, quite a dark little trio happening there. And on this side of the label as well. So clearly the word hate jar has far more mold growing in it. The thought jar, where I try to envision the, like, being hateful towards a bit, and envisioning it like rotting and oozing, and you can see like that's comparatively darker than the other rices. A lot on the top here, you can see there, down here. It's really surrounding the whole jar, where there's a few spots in the other one. Quite clearly a large difference in the jar. And this is just holding the jar and thinking at it. This one is physically, I'm holding the jar and telling it how ugly and horrible it is, and how it's nutritionally deficient, and all the sorts of little hate things. And at the end, I always end up with a 6 hates, like I hate you, 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 which is north, south, east, west, and up and down, just to have it covered. And the same with this jar. I end it the same, but I'm just thinking. So that's interesting. So let's go see what the control jars are doing. There we are. Here's our control jars, where they just remain sitting on the cupboard in between the love and the hate jars. I don't pick them up or say anything to them. This is the first time I've touched them in 6 days. There is a small amount of mold in the corner here. Let's see, I'll go around. A little on the top, up here. Little spot happening down there. Clearly, there's a little yellowy discoloring there, but clearly nowhere near as much mold as either of the hate jars we've looked at. And the thought one, kind of yellowy discoloration happening here. Oh, there is some mold there, a little darker than in the other jar. And one grain at the top here that's sort of attached to the side of the jar by itself. Clearly, nowhere near as moldy as the hate jars. So we will continue to see what happens. See you in a little bit. So it seems on the 6th day, quite clearly we're getting some results that I really wasn't too sure would happen the way it does. I know that everyone does the experiments and they say this really happens. And it does seem to be following what people are saying, that the hate jar is molding faster than the love jars, which stay quite nice, and the control jars are somewhere in between. And so far, it does seem to be following that pattern. So we'll need to wait a few more days to see if things change or if it follows in the same direction. But definitely, I think you can almost say that the water that is in the rice is actually holding something, some kind of intention that is changing the rice. Let's see what happens in a few more days. Here we are, it's day 9 for our comparative look. Here's the jar of love that has been spoken to. It's looking fairly good. Let's see. A little bit of something in the top there. I'm not spinning my jar very well today. Oh, little spot there still, of course. Still looking pretty good. It's not too discolored. Where's that little mark? There we go. Oh, 2 little pieces. And the love thought jar is looking fairly good still. Little yellowing, but on the whole, looking quite good. So let's go and check our control jars. So here we are with the control jars. This is actually, they're both exactly the same. We're not actually talking to them or doing anything. A little yellowing there. Looking fairly good. There's a little bit of discoloration there. A little mold. And here's the other one. We've got a fair-sized bit of mold there and on the top, so it's expanding. Definitely some yellowing going on there. On the bottom, we don't want to do anything terrible there. Oh, a little bit there on the other jar. So there a little bit of mold and a little bit of discoloration. Not too bad for day 9. And here's our hate jars. Here's the word jar. There we go. There's some up in the top there, kind of hard to see. More mold on the back here. That was where those 3 grains were. There's looks like another piece, so there's at least 4 bits there, and another one starting right here. And a bunch there. Let's see. Some in behind the label, which will be hard to see. No, that's the yellowing on the bottom. So that's the word jar. The thought jar is clearly molding insanely quickly. On the top, you can see the yellow streak running through. A lot of mold. There's yellow-green mold. Clearly, the thought jar is molding much faster than any of the other jars. Like when I do envision this jar, I do envision it quite clearly rotting and black and oozing and even smelling. I imagine it smelling, which may be why it is molding and getting bad at a much quicker rate. But quite clearly, both the hate jars are far more moldy than the other jars. And the control jars, which you do nothing to, they should be about the same, but they don't match up. So it seems like the experiment so far is quite positive for the results that Dr. Emoto's been getting. So we'll wait a few more days and see what happens. There we go. Hi, everybody. It's day 10, Sunday, March 24th. Last night, I was looking up some of the Dr. Emoto rice clips that people have done, and I found out something that I didn't remember seeing last time, where he put raw rice in with boiled water into jars. Now, I've seen the steamed rice ones, like many times, which is why I didn't even think to go in and check to see if he did anything any differently, because I thought I knew. So I have done a mini set of jars. So we will continue with this. I'll just do a quick little swing. There we go. There's our mini jars, and they're all labeled exactly the same. In comparison, there you can see the big jars compared to the little ones. So we are going to continue with the experiment. I'm going to, because I've had such great luck with the thought jars, I'm going to use thoughts on the little jars, and we will continue to see what happens. So once again, I started out by boiling the glass jars to remove any bacteria that could contaminate the experiment. We set them up with plain rice in the bottoms, nothing done to them. We poured in boiled water and we sealed them up. And that is pretty much what the Dr. Emoto experiment that I missed stated on how to do. So there we are. Day 12 for the 6 main jars and day 2 for the small mini experiment. The jars are looking pretty much the same. That's still looking pretty good. The hate jar, it's got quite a bit there. A lot coming down in through here. There's some on the top you can't really see. Our mini ones at day 2 look equally as even, but it's only day 2. The thought jars looking pretty good. That's the control is getting a little bit more mold in that one, but the hate jar, it's really going quite through most of the jar. Really bad at the back there. There we go. Welcome back, everybody. We've jumped up to day 20 and 13 for the mini experiment. Here's our love jars. Try to put them in the sunlight so we can see. This is the word jar. And still looking pretty good. Very white, a little bit of discoloration, but still, there's that little spot there. It's quite tiny. And our thought jar, a little yellowing, but not anything terrible. Looks like that one little teeny tiny area behind the chalk label. Still quite white and looking pretty good. Now to compare both jars side by side, they're matching fairly closely. There we go. So there's our love jars at day 20. Here's our control jars. You can see some yellowing. Let's see. A little bit of darker yellow through this area. Looking pretty good. There's our well, they're both no action control jars. This one does have some mold in it and some definite yellowing. This is, both these jars are treated exactly the same. There's, now for the hate jars. This is the thought jar. Definitely a lot of mold, way more than any of the other jars. A lot on the top. You can see it's coming down in through here. A lot in the back here compared to the other 2 word jars. Is anything in the bottom? Yes, it's starting to go down into the bottom as well. That's our word jar. Now the thought jar. Unbelievable. The devastation inside. It's very sort of yellowy and gummy down in the bottom. Very, very dark. You can see all down in through there. This weird yellowing that's happening. The bottom doesn't look too bad, but the top is unbelievable. The difference between all of the other jars and the thought jar. So as far as the main jars that we started with, seems to be fairly conclusive that the hate jars are way worse than any of the other jars. So, you know, that's 4 other jars that these are completely different from. So let's take a look at our mini ones. So here we are with our mini experiment at day 13. So this is with the raw rice and the boiled water put in immediately and sealed. And I'm doing only thoughts at these jars. The love jar, still fairly white. The water within is a little cloudy. Oh, that would be my tummy. Sorry about that weird noise. That has nothing to do with the rice whatsoever. The control jar seems, well, it's looks like there's a little bit of scum or something on the top there. Let's see, comparative. If we put it behind, it's still fairly clear. I thought if I put light behind it, there might show a big difference. And then the hate jar, does it look? It does have a little bit of what slimy bubbly stuff at the top, but nothing out of the ordinary. Let's see if we put them all together. Whoops. Comparatively, they do appear similar. There's a little bit of cloudy water and a little bit of something at the top, but nothing terrible. So at day 9 with the other experiment is when we started to notice mold. So if I had to guess why these are comparatively similar, even though they've been exposed to the exact same thought process as the other thought jars, the water may be creating an oxygen barrier because they're within the water. So perhaps the timing of this experiment is going to take a lot longer. I will let the other jars sit and continue. I will definitely keep watching these, and we'll see if anything happens in the next little while. So we'll wait a few days, and if something starts to happen, I'll let you know. But so far, nothing much is happening with the original experiment. There we go. Welcome back, everybody. It's day 38 for the original and day 21 for the mini. This is going to be our final conclusion episode, because within a few days mystical gatherings will be. So let's take a quick comparison of the jars. I'll see you in just a moment. There we are. Here's our love jars. And as you can see, they're looking pretty good still. There's the odd little spot that's turned, but everything is fine. Here's the thought jar, where there was no talking to this one at all. A little tiny bit of discoloration there, but on the whole is looking very good. And comparison side by side, we'll turn so you can see. There we are. There is a bit of shadow in there. That's just shadow. And here are our control jars where absolutely nothing was done to them whatsoever. You can see a little bit here, kind of yellowy, nothing too horrible going on in that jar. And this one, a little mushier. There's two not very big ones compared to what we have in some of the other jars. Still, the rest of the rice is looking quite good. There's one spot here, and the two here, which would be the normal breakdown of the rice since nothing has been done to them. There might be a little bit in that one at the top. So the thought jar and the thought jar and the word jars, which had absolutely nothing done to them, this is what should naturally happen with the breakdown, and it's not that bad. You can see in the top there's that one spot that's getting in the center there, but that would be the natural breakdown with nothing being done to them. And here we are with our hate jars. The word jar, quite a lot going on in there. You can see if I tip the jar, a lot of mold in this one, especially on this side. You can see it's going through everywhere, and it is even going into the bottom of the jar. This is our thought jar, which really reacted extremely well in this experiment, I think. This would be, oh, and we've got some funky yellowy stuff, yellowy green going on here. The whole top is completely consumed. The bottom of the jar, although it's yellowy, it doesn't seem to have gone through into the bottom, but it's getting close if we left it for a couple of more days. And side by side, you can see the difference from the other jars to this jar, especially the control jars, is rather shocking. So let's see what's happening with our mini jars. There we go. Here we are with our mini experiment. The rice, dry rice, poured boiling water in and sealed, like the experiment I saw Dr. Emoto do. The love jar, which thoughts only with these ones, and you can see if I hold it up to the light, oh, maybe not. It's a little cloudy, but there is really nothing happening with that jar. The control jar, which just sat there on the dresser doing nothing. And you can, it's a bureau, it's not really there's a little cloudiness, but it's not really much different than the first jar. Sorry about that. Our hate jar, it's clearly more cloudy. There appears to be a bit of scumminess on the top there. We'll see if I can get them close up to compare if we turn them. So we've got love, control, and the hate one. There is a little bit, maybe bubbles or something there. Let's see, but you can clearly see there's more on this one. But it's really just the color of the water and not so much anything going on. And I had to stop and ask myself, okay, we had results, oops. Okay, we had some really good results with the other jars at day 9. You started to be able to see, I think it was day 9, or between day 9 and day 15, let's say, we started to see some distinct differences in the jars, where these ones aren't, and you have to ask yourself, well, why is that? And I believe, now I do recall someone saying that the experiment took 2 to 3 months, which was probably this experiment. And the reason I believe that that has happened, and they changed it to the steamed rice, is this water is creating a seal, so no oxygen can actually get down into the rice, which means it's anaerobic, which means that oxygen isn't in that environment, and the mold or the bacteria is having a difficult time starting to grow. So I will keep these in these bottles for a while. I think the experiment clearly shows that there's definitely something going on. You've got 9 jars. I could have had 9 different results, but it seemed to be, love jars seemed to be fairly clear and white. The control jars were somewhere in between, and the hate jars, even though they were done in different styles, clearly seem to back up the experiments that we've seen. If anything interesting happens with these, I may end a little blurb on there because it hasn't been a month yet. But I'll keep watch on these to see what happens, and we'll have a little discussion and see what everyone thinks. So something interesting just happened. When my bottles, the mini jars, sort of tipped over and I laid them down, when I went to pick them up, one leaked out all over my hands. The smell is kind of funky, so there is definitely something going on with those jars. I'm not sure which one dribbled on my hand. Very fermenty, and like not a horrible smell. I mean, it's strong, sort of a sour, fermenty kind of a smell. So I will definitely keep a watch on those jars and let you know what happens.